Tournaments are a staple of shonen anime and have been for decades now. Tournament arc is a trope that is ingrained into the very narrative structure of a variety of manga, making it almost a crucial essence of the overall story. And since I've grown up almost internalizing these stories in my head, of course I'm going to equate it with other forms of media that I consume. For those of you not in the know, tournament arcs center around a cast of characters, including a protagonist and even antagonists, in direct competition with one another in a balanced and systematic manner. In a tournament, as the name suggests, there are hordes of different objectives for a tournament, including and not limited to a MacGuffin that our hero needs in order to move the plot forward, or a main antagonist orchestrating the tournament for their motives. But a main limitation for the solely objective driven arcs is that if drawn out long enough, they can get a little boring because it is almost always a given that our heroes would eventually win, so it is more a matter of when and not how. A far more interesting tournament arc, to me at least, is one that does not especially rely on an objective but a theme of determining the strongest, where instead of this idea of winning, that desire is the main focus, and not just for the main hero, an individual goal that defines each of the supporting cast to fuel them towards their desired character growth. A good dichotomy for the same thought could be tournaments that happen in film and actual sports. While cinematic tournaments are heavily inclined towards the plot and objective, the timing does create a limit in how much focus the other participants get in relation to that hero. The original Karate Kid has, in my opinion, one of the best tournaments in cinema, but its structure still does not allow kids other than Daniel San to be in the spotlight. And that is fair. It is not a criticism for the film or even the structure, it is simply different from what I need out of a tournament. Conversely, sports tournaments focus on determining the strongest and not plots and objectives because obviously they do not. Evil corporations are not holding their power structures in balance for 10 countries to fight over a World Cup, even though I so wish they did. The limitation here being a simple fact that sports are not stories. But what if there is a medium where the best aspects of a tournament arc not only exist but are given the time to flourish? Pro wrestling can never become a true sport because the results are predetermined to tell a story. Pro wrestling can also never have a definitive plot that ends like the movies, but rather a cycle of drama that keeps on moving. And that is why I call it such a weird amalgamation of sports and theatre. And in this essay and subsequently the series that this video is a pilot to, I will look at some of the impactful roles that tournaments play in the medium of pro wrestling. And we start with an arc that is not too distant in the past, but might be pretty awesome to look back at. A long time back, in the country of Japan, born out of a tradition of keeping the fighting spirit alive and thriving in the culture, a tournament was devised by the visionary father of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Antonio Inoki, that would have many iterations throughout its decades worth of history, the most known version being the G1 Climax. The fact that this name has popped up in every video essay where I talk about New Japan is a testament to the function it has in the deep rooted cultural ethos of the Japanese wrestling company. An annual summer fair defined by its grueling month long schedule that takes a heavy toll on the minds and bodies of 20 odd participants. It is widely regarded by many as the pinnacle of the Sudo sport, in part courtesy to the excellent quality of the matches, but also because of the intertwined nature of each of the story layers mixing together and developing with each year and with each G1. If the tournament is defined by its long-standing tradition, a case study in this video is a complete outsider to not only this tradition, but to the culture in general. The G1 Climax 24 took place in 2014 and it had many different roles. The redemption of Kazuchika Okada, Shibata and Ishii's classic rivalry, and Tomoaki Honma's pathos-filled journey to finding his first victory in all of the block matches just being a few. But the one that sticks out to me the most is the special introduction that the wrestlers, the fans, and the culture of New Japan got of one American prodigy, AJ Styles. While Gaijin wrestlers were not a foreign concept to Japan, no pun intended, the most famous outsiders that caused a wave in the heavyweight division at least were distinct in their massive builds. People like Bob Sapp, Vader, or most recently Brock Lesnar personified dominance over the homegrown talent pool in their respective eras and gained a level of notoriety in the process. With Styles representing a shift towards the workhorse era that would come to define New Japan in the coming years, the fans were still yet to be familiarized with the shortest man in history to hold the prestigious IWGP Heavyweight Championship, winning it in his very first match, challenging for it, beating the recently crowned ace Kazuchika Okada. Being introduced to the Japanese crowd mere months before the premier tournament took place that year, Styles was put in a tough spot, not only participating in his very first G1, but his very first G1 as a champion, making him not only the wildcard outsider, but also the dragon of the tournament, the man to beat. So saying there was a pressure to deliver would be an understatement. Not to mention, the title itself was won under nefarious conditions with Bullet Club interfering in typical Bullet Club fashion. So the skepticism was rather earned. And so here we are at the doorstep to AJ Styles' G1 Climax 24 campaign. Fighting him in the main event of day 1 of the round robin tournament was a man who had felled to him 3 times in less than 3 months, Kazuchika Okada. A showcase for Styles' brashness in the face of Okada's sturdiness. Having been in that spot of winning the title before even competing in the G1, Okada was familiar with AJ's situation and used his nervousness against him in the opening stretch of the match. While AJ felt the need to pander to the audience every time he was lucky to hit Okada with one of his flashy moves, Okada was more focused in his attacks and paced a slow technical battle for his opening match in a tournament that gets brutal by the day with injuries piling on top of fatigue. Showing off his prowess in the face of AJ's overconfidence leads Styles to make mistakes, even being thrown into the sky, leading him to come crashing down owing to his own speed. It was obvious Okada was the smarter player on this night, gaining advantage over an opponent that he fought 3 times before and learned from those ventures. Styles proved to be cocky again, jumping over the barricade when thrown towards it and showing off his agility to the crowd, turning his back to an opponent who dived body first into him. If anything proves a difference between Okada and AJ's approach in this match, it's timing. Knowing when to hold back and when to set off is what separates inexperience from experience. It's not that Okada does not go for flashy moves. He deliberately places the flashiness in perfect spots all throughout the bout, and it is defined in the second phase of the match. This until Bullet Club interferes yet again to give AJ the advantage, but Okada adapts and overcomes the threat, leading into the final phase of the match. Both going into full gear now, the match is decided when something unexpected to AJ happens. Hitting a picture perfect release German suplex to Okada leads to a moment where Okada shows his fighting spirit. Instead of staying down, he pushes past the pain and stands up on his feet. This fighting spirit defines the uncharted territory that AJ has entered. Styles again tries to evade a reverse neck breaker using his cat-like agility, but is instead spun into a tombstone, leaving him vulnerable for the Rainmaker to be hit. First match into the G1, Styles has been defeated. Fans gravitating towards an Okada who redeems himself of all the losses and begins his climb past the champion. So much for a dragon. Styles does go on to face and beat Toru Yano on night 2, though his next big match comes on the 4th night against Tetsuya Naito. Having skipped night 3, a luxury that Naito does not get to experience, AJ heads into the match fresh and well rested. There is a significant shift in his personality, however, coming in with more aggression than his first bout. He goes straight for Naito's head, quite literally, attacking his already bandaged forehead injured from the previous bouts, tearing open the wound, making things a bloody mess. Being overconfident in the first match should not work, but being aggressive surely would, perhaps. AJ does not pander to the crowd as often, yet finds it tough to keep the Stardust genius down. Naito is on the defensive for the most parts as AJ wears him down bit by bit, but finds his moments to spring up into action, leaving Styles baffled as to where is the energy even coming from. There is a noticeable approach with which AJ is fighting here. For all his dynamic high flying and ruthlessness, he is somewhat rigid in his philosophy. Not unlike his first match with Okada, there is a heavy reliance on his own skills, and as weird as this may sound, wrestling matches cannot just be won on skill alone. Styles shows tremendous ability and craftsmanship, but what Naito shows is heart. And that is where the difference lies. Fighting spirit, as we would come to know it. Even with the rest to his body and viciously attacking an injured opponent, AJ cannot keep Naito down, who bursts into spectacular form, speeding from one move to the next, wearing AJ down to a point where he is completely vulnerable to a Gloria. And then a Stardust press seals the deal in his favor. A defenseless Styles cannot even counter, and it leads to another defeat within just the opening three matches. Not the strongest of starts that a champion of the world could have. Styles was doing something wrong, and it was up to him to figure it out. As we enter the meat of the tournament going forward, it reveals to us where the actual beauty of it lies. It is not in the biggest star attractions where you find the best of fights. Often it is a support cast, the mid card, that shine as the workhorses. Rock Lee vs. Kara, anyone? AJ's next match is against the immovable resident samurai of New Japan, arguably his first introduction to the legendary art of strong style and one of its practitioners, the Neverman, Hiroki Goto. Styles is oddly calmer on the offset than his previous encounters. He neither divides his attention to the crowd nor does he go in with blind aggression. Rather, he shows restraint as he tries to figure Goto and his energy out. There are two things of note that happen in the opening stretch of the match: AJ falling to Goto's incoming shoulder tackle and him maneuvering out of a German suplex with a backflip and landing on his feet. These are not super enticing moments in isolation, but if you were to listen to the crowd, the cheers were at their loudest for these two specific opening bits. The core thing that makes AJ Styles is his spectacular tendency to counter his opponent's moves with cat-like precision, and in this moment, I assume, is where the crowd first notices that about him and reacts in kind to the loud cheer. A small glimpse of his characteristic USP. AJ takes control for a big chunk of the match. There is a stark contrast with which he is focusing his attacks in order to wear Goto down, with submissions instead of flashy moves. He is now pacing himself for the big guns, and it works for him as Goto starts to show fatigue. Styles demonstrates a balance between evasiveness and resiliency for the moments where Hiroki Goto does manage to overwhelm him with his spirit. The turning point occurs when Styles and Goto get into laying elbow strikes to each other, a staple for Japanese wrestling, a facet that AJ is still new to. As the pace quickens, AJ evades yet again and counters Goto speeding like a train towards him with a beautiful looking flashy dropkick, and the crowd erupts for it. From here on, a fuse lights inside AJ, who awakens his own fighting spirit for arguably the first time in the tournament. His resiliency peaks when he kicks out of a devastating sunset bomb off the second row, something that baffles the crowd as they gasp and cheer all at the same time. He counters a brainbuster into a Pele kick before finishing Goto off with a Bloody Sunday, and finally the styles clash. Finally, a victory deserving of a champion, and more than that, earning the cheers of a crowd that was starting to warm up to this Gaijin. But this was just a start. After conquering over the veteran samurai, AJ topples his mentor Hiroyoshi Tenzan to move on to a match that defines AJ's entire G1 campaign and his New Japan career. Now on a path of victories, AJ faces his toughest test yet, a test of endurance, pain, and will as he stands opposite resident psychopath of New Japan, Minoru Suzuki, one of the most dangerous men in the sport, not because of his ability to torture you, but because of the pleasure he derives from doing so. AJ puts on a strong face and stands nose to nose with Suzuki, as if bracing himself for what is to come. A crowd that was slowly beginning to warm up to Styles and showing signs of appreciation had seemed to come to finally accept him on this night. Right off the bat, Suzuki starts with a slap across his face and AJ counters with a dropkick for both to spill outside. The gas are pushed further as AJ hits a flying forearm to Suzuki over the barricades and then poses to a crowd that is not annoyed by his cockiness but genuinely embraces him as they mimic his hand sign in appreciation. This is not the same AJ we saw against Okada. Suzuki takes in this initial punishment for a reason. He goes on to systematically break the right arm with which Styles performs flying forearms in a series of vicious submission holds, even going as far as to use a chair as leverage. The crowd is made to sit through an excruciating 5-minute phase of Suzuki just tormenting the champion who has no other choice but to wince and scream in pain. Essentially left with one arm functioning, Styles still puts on a fight against his opponent. It is here where you start to wonder about timings and why they are crucial in the story surrounding tournaments. It was important for Styles to falter against Okada and Naito in the beginning and gradually find his footing in matches against veterans like Goto and Tenzan, and finally face the ultimate test of survival in this match with Minoru Suzuki, where he uses all that he has learned up until now. Would it have worked to have had the same match with the same beats but not in this position but perhaps as an opener? AJ Styles' journey was the key to this match, not being simply great technically in isolation, but memorable in the eyes of the fans that saw its champion grow and face adversity. And that is where the drama is. There are moments here where AJ could have given up and nobody would have faulted him for it. But he fights through, even using his strength to convert an armbar into a one-arm Styles clash. He stands toe to toe with Suzuki as they get into a slap fest in the middle of the ring. But AJ does not lose his footing even after a legitimate right knuckle to his face and answers with a Pele kick. With no defenses left, Suzuki is put down with a final Styles clash and the champion perseveres, his streak of wins intact. With the title strap resting over his injured shoulder, AJ is rightfully showered with a chorus of chants calling out his name from around the arena. AJ Styles has here, at this moment, arrived. This here is a fitting conclusion to AJ's tournament arc, a champion proving his worth to an audience that was wary. But there are still stories to be covered. A classic David vs. Goliath affair with the giant lance archer demonstrates Styles' technical prowess as he cannot just rely on a Styles clash to an opponent far taller than him. Instead, chopping the big man down over time, working on his leg gives him an opportunity to introduce his calf crusher to New Japan. He uses his tenacity and smarts to make Lance tap out to him instead of putting him down for a 3 count, proving his status as an all-round prodigy of the game. His next challenge is not a physical one, but rather a more psychological one. The man he faces is his own Bullet Club stablemate and second in command, Carl Anderson. Being there since the origin of the stable, there are still hints of how Anderson is the person truly deserving of the mantle of leader. It is one thing to be a champion, but a completely different thing to be the alpha. And that is what this match sets out to do. To make matters more interesting was the facet that only a few nights ago, Carl defeated Okada in one of the G1 block matches, adding a little more drama to the game. AJ proves his mettle not just to the fans, but to a stable that was on rocky grounds after the departure of their previous leader Prince Devitt. Beating Carl with Devitt's own Bloody Sunday followed by a Styles clash was symbolic of the takeover of leadership in the eyes of the fans and Bullet Club. By now, I think it is rather obvious to all of us that winning the tournament has almost no weight when it comes to the completion of an arc. Styles goes on to win his remaining block matches against Yujiro Takahashi and Togi Makabe and end his block tally with the most points at 16 and his 7-match winning streak. What had to be established had already been established, which is why it does not really pinch us as hard when it is Okada who goes onward to the finals, joining with Styles at the points table and moving up on the accounts of a technicality. AJ Styles is not the protagonist. AJ Styles does not need to win the G1 to legitimize a story. AJ Styles, like everyone in that tournament, had a role to fill. It has become a common saying in wrestling that wins and losses matter, like any other sport. It is something that I don't really agree with. There is a caveat that I like to believe, and it is that it is not simply wins and losses that matter, but who you defeat and who you lose to that really matters, and how these individuals are perceived as heavily plays into that. Without the build-up, Suzuki facing an undercooked Styles would have necessarily been a story of a veteran anti-hero teaching a cocky gaijin a lesson in pain and humility. But with a Styles that is on a path to belong, Minoru Suzuki becomes a foil for that development. And that is at the heart of what I mean. AJ's role was not simply to go out there and amaze the spectators with his prowess and abilities. That was what the G1 was for, the tournament's role. AJ's role in the grand scheme of things was to become a perfect foil for the championship endeavors of Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi. That Okada faltering to an unknown threat in AJ Styles before the G1 and repeatedly losing to him was necessary, so that when Tanahashi was to defeat a seasoned AJ Styles at the end of G1, it shows the stark contrast in Okada and Tanahashi without them even having to fight each other. When Okada wins the G1 Climax and Tanahashi defeats Styles for the championship eventually, it automatically builds layers for Tanahashi still being leaps and bounds ahead of Okada when it comes to being a champion. And that is why when Okada falls to Tanahashi eventually at the forthcoming Wrestle Kingdom 9, Okada breaks down into tears because he is just not there yet. There is a reason why AJ Styles was the only person other than Okada and Tanahashi to hold the championships over the course of 2014 and 2015. Styles was a common link and the barrier for both these men, and that is what his tournament arc solidifies to an extent. That was AJ's role. There is a theme of belonging when it comes to this arc. AJ Styles, as we have all come to know, has been defined by his ventures around the world, fighting across loads of companies, big and small. His breaking away from his longtime home in TNA gave him the outlook to explore further territories, and that is how he ended up in Japan, a country where he is not a household name. Fans who were witnessing him for the first time probably went through the same emotions that I felt when I first saw him in WWE years later. Wow, he beat the top name of the company and has made the champion in such a short time. He must be great. The wonderment of his greatness is through only hearing about it. The G1 aimed at actually showing it. AJ Styles was a person to break away from the tradition of big bouldering foreign threats and became a prototype for future gaijins like Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay to shine in the heavyweight division. The 2 years that AJ Styles was in New Japan is a rather short amount of time to accomplish any sort of credibility. But the fact that AJ Styles remains one of their most respected gaijins, leaving a memorable legacy behind, is testament to the power that a tournament like G1 Climax holds without even having to win it. And that is just a story of one arc. Imagine the hundreds of special tournament arcs that have taken place over decades that this pseudo sport has existed, waiting to be explored. But hey, is there a tournament arc from any part of the world that you would like me to cover? Tell me down in the comments along with what you feel was the most impactful moment in AJ's 2 year run in New Japan. As always, I appreciate you reaching the end. At the moment, things are seemingly bad in the country where I hail from. So if you're watching this in India, I hope you and your family are keeping safe. For viewers from other parts of the world, it is important to spread information about the conditions and help. So if you see any viable donation portals, please consider sparing some funds for resources like oxygen concentrators. Citizens here could use all the help they could get. Cheers. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.